I spent a lot of time doing what I thought they wanted instead of what I thought was my best. And now I wish I hadn't.
Glenn, if we add up the years, the professional years and the non-professional years of your life, how many years would you say you've pursued writing and screenwriting as a career?
I had about 25 years working, and I had about 18 before that struggling to get a job, to get work. So I'm really bad at math, but I think that's 40 something. Anyway, it's many decades.
And in the 40 years, you were still working even if you weren't making money. You were, I think we talked about it in our last interview.
Every day. It started from this, I liked doing creative work. And the more just doing it every day, trying to work on the work, work on the content of the work, working on the quality and the subject matter and just that stuff was the first task. And then eventually there's like, well, how do I get this out? How do I understand the market, all that? But it still comes from every day doing the thing, making something, writing something, trying to plot it out, trying to, whatever it is, doing some work every single day. That's been nonstop since I was in high school.
And you talked about in our last interview, which I believe was in 2021 or 2020-ish, around that time, that you were a temp and that it actually fit in quite well.
It didn't feel like it at the time, but it did, in fact. At the time, I kept thinking, I don't want to do this. I want to be, a movie writer. But in fact, it was like, the stories back in the 20th century of some writer who would bum around and work as a bartender and work on a ship and all those things, and then they would write their novels about that. That's sort of what it was like, except I was all in Manhattan. And I would go from job to job, and I would work at a textile company and then a pharmaceutical advertising company. And I was meeting a lot of people I never would have met and understanding a lot of kinds of lives I never would have seen. And that was fabulous. And I now don't regret it, although at the time I was gritting my teeth and saying, when do I get to stop doing this? So yes, life is worth living while you're working, while you're writing.
But you also knew you didn't want to do the corporate 9 to 5. You wanted to be a writer at your desk facing the blank page, however difficult that was. Yes,
and what I had to figure out was how to do that while I was temping. So I would think, okay, my blank page is here. I mean, at the time, I would have like a little spiral notebook, but that would be the blank page. Or I would just take some of their office stationery and put it in the typewriter and write a little bit of whatever I was working on. And so that was actually really good for me, because what I learned was the blank page, whenever you open it, for however long you open it, that's the game. That's the best thing you can do. And so therefore, even if I only had 15 minutes between Xeroxing and filing, throw that stolen stationery in there and write even just some notes to myself. This is the story I want to write, and this is what I'm thinking about it. Or some thoughts about a character, half a page. Somebody would come over and tell me to Xerox something. I would take the page, throw it in my little briefcase. And then after a while, I'd have a big stack of those, and I could start to really work from it. So, yeah.
Well, you've said that you have few regrets, but one regret you do have is the amount of time you put in trying to figure out the rules of the game and how to, quote, win the game.
Yeah. I would say among the biggest regrets I have was the amount of time I spent trying to figure out what they wanted. And at the time, there was a relatively clear they. There's a relatively small industry and a relatively few companies, and it took them a couple years to make a movie, so you knew what they were working on. Now, literally it's changing every 6 months what they want, because they'll say, oh, this is trending, let's veer over to that. But at the time, I could really say, like, what do they want? And I spent a lot of time doing what I thought they wanted instead of what I thought was my best. and now I wish I hadn't. I'm not saying you should only do whatever you feel like and not think at all about how to get it out to the public, but I do wish someone had told me, at the end of the day, you're going to look back at things that you did just to please someone else, and you're going to wish that instead you had done that thing that was burning in your heart, that even if it was a disastrous failure, you will look back and say, that was worth it, that was fun, it was me, I did my best, and it feels, to me at least, it feels better. I know that there are many people who don't feel like something counts unless it's accepted by the industry and put through the business and released in a formal way. I believe that's one good thing, but it's not the only thing. And that something you do for yourself, something you do by yourself and release on your own, which now, thank goodness, we actually can do. And even if only a handful of people see it, that's the whole point of what you're doing, is to do something authentically yours and show it to someone. And if even a tiny percentage of them authentically get it, that's literally the end. That's the only end I know of art. The rest of art is endless. You're just like, let me see what I can do next. But individually, you do a piece, and if somebody gets it, that's the satisfaction. And if somebody were to pay a lot for it and nobody got it, it's nice to pay your bills, but it feels crappy. And I have had that happen. I have had my name on television episodes where literally there isn't a single line I wrote. And I loved working on that, and I loved paying the bills, but I was constantly thinking, well, when am I going to get to do my thing? Which is exactly like what it was like at the temp office. So day jobs are day jobs, whether or not they're fancy industry day jobs or you're working at a pharmaceutical advertising company, which morally I kind of wish I hadn't done, but I had to pay the rent.
You said trying to figure out the rules and win the game. When you say rules, are you also talking about writing rules, or this was just industry rules?
I'm not sure that there's that much of a difference between writing rules and industry rules, because the writing rules, unless there's somebody who has some deep aesthetic belief that they're going to make rules about, most of the rules come from somebody saying, this is what we want to buy, or this is what they're trying to sell. Honestly, most of the rules that are currently taught, promulgated, are just industry rules. They're not art rules. Like that, even the 3-act structure, that's not actually an art rule. I mean, there are periods of time in theater back in the late 1900s and mid 20th century where plays had 3 acts, but movies never had acts. They just borrowed that from theater because they needed something to hang on to because they were making it up as they went along. So I don't know, there are many art theories. You can call them rules if you want, but they're just theories. They're just somebody's best guess at what should be done or what they think is good. The rest of the rules, so-called, are just somebody, it's cool that Sid Field wrote that, which is an amazing book. Sid Field's book, screenplay, amazing. However, he sort of said, there's 3 acts and they work like this, and this is the turning point. And that was a really good way to do it. It's not an actual universal thing of art. And if you look at Shakespeare's plays, he doesn't really do that. So for me, learning the industry rules, what the business was looking for at the moment. And when you're young, you think whatever's happening at the moment is universal. And now that I'm old, I look back and I see that I've gone through many universals and that they have then been forgotten. And so therefore, whatever universals we think we've got, they're temporary. Artistically, things are constantly changing. And I do regret that I spent a lot of time trying to please the industry at the expense of something I truly loved and believed in.
And this is slightly off topic, and it's hard to define what is old. If you're talking about, 20 under...
Social Security.
Okay, well, no, I think that Medicare, just went
actually,
up. Yeah.
I haven't done Social Security yet, but no, I'm 67.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm old.
You're
I'm
young.
I'm
67,
literally
yeah.
old.
Well,
But-
it's
Yes.
relative though.
Yes.
And what I was going to say is that, did you have an old soul? I know you talked about in
Yeah,
college. I couldn't
yeah.
picture you
No, I
being an
was-
old soul in college.
I think partly, the definition of old soul for me was having a lot of anxiety as a child. So I was very fearful, and therefore very alert, trying to make sure I wasn't done in by any number of horrible imaginary things. And I guess that made me aware before my time, perhaps, of the sweep of human life, which is what you get as you go older.
Sure.
It is funny because I've heard recently, like you'll hear somebody, well, we're all gonna die.
Right.
Most of us really, really try not to think about that.
Sure.
One of the values of art actually is to remind us in a palatable way, so that because the value of it is to make you spend more time on the things that are truly valuable and truly what you won't regret when you are at the end. And those things are not necessarily aligned with what makes you most popular or most wealthy. And that's a balance you have to work on when you're an artist, because you want popularity because you want people to see your stuff, or you may just want popularity because you like attention.
Sure.
And that's cool. But for me, the awareness of the fragility of the things around us was ever present. And I believe that is what attracts us to art, because art holds on to those things. The only way to hold on to something is either in your mind, or if it's going to be an object, it's going to be a picture of it or a story about it. And somehow or other, those things hold the sweep of time. Boy, I am getting grand here.
I love it. This is great.
It's yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. No. That's
is
it. That's it. We are very fragile, and we are in time, and therefore, art is one of the few things, and I would include history and philosophy and all those things as essentially art forms. They are ways to capture or understand this thing we're in, this life. And so, yeah, I was attracted to that very early on. It was one of the few things that comforted me as a child. And so I just clung to it. I sort of got addicted to it in a very real sense. In other words, I don't feel good if I am on withdrawal from art. If I can't consume some art and make some art of any kind, I feel bad. So yeah, sorry, I forgot the question.
No, I love it. And lastly, and I love this topic here. You say if you felt a withdrawal from art at some, or if you feel that you're having a withdrawal from art, that you don't feel good. If you're ever in one of those settings, if you remember back, let's say the pharmaceutical company or whatever, and you weren't being artistic, but is there an art to being this observer of these busy bees and how,
Absolutely.
We'll get them on the phone now,
And that's actually the only part of it that really stays with me. I have to say, I don't often think back of it and think about how miserable I often was. And I was just resentful of having to make a living. I was resentful of all that. And I was like, why won't they just let me have all my time to do whatever I want? But the truth is, first of all, I would take notes on people and things and stuff that was going on. And that's what tends to cling to my memory now. And that is food for the rest of the work, for the rest of your life. I had the good luck to meet Robert Benton, who directed Kramer versus Kramer, wrote Bonnie and Clyde, Places in the Heart. He was a brilliant, brilliant filmmaker. And I got to meet him a few times, and when I was temping. And he would say, like, how's it going? And I would say, I hate this temping thing. And he'd say, you are going to look back on that, and that is going to be the fuel for everything you're going to do once you are not temping anymore. And I was like, thank you very much, sir. You can say that. You've got an Academy Award. I'm sitting in the temp. But he was right. He was absolutely right. It makes you who you are, all of those things, whatever those are. Mine was that. Other people's will be very, very different, but it doesn't matter. Whatever you are is the fuel that you will feed into the locomotive furnace of your work and use it to move ahead. Yeah, it's if all you do is study what is successful popular art or what sells, then all you'll be feeding into that engine is other people's stuff. And there's a hollowness to that, I believe. Sometimes it can be great. I mean, a lot of hollow art is a lot of fun, but there's something about that feeling that you're connecting to real people's lives, that you're connecting to some real experience that will animate, and it'll animate literally in the sense of bring life to, give life to whatever art you're doing. Whether it's a caper movie or a study of a family in crisis, that feeling that you're somehow connecting to human truth is really, really important. And it's not, that's the rules that it's not in the rules. The rules will say, be sure to put in some truth. Spend some time thinking about truth. Spend some time thinking about what is true and why, and what does it mean to you, and what does it mean to this made-up story that's patently untrue. But where is the truth in that? Where is the thing that you feel or that you know, that you say, oh, I recognize that emotion or that experience of loss or gain or whatever it is that is happening in the story.
Thank you for watching the video all the way to the end. Here is a complimentary question from our book Story Questions.